All right, thanks. Hi, everybody. It's Megan Shuey with Unleashed Confessions, and I'm joined today by Brianna Hall. I'm so excited to have her here. Brianna and I met in a Facebook group, I think,
hmm
um, and I've just loved watching her journey. And she so enthusiastically said that she'd love to come on and let me interview her. So, thanks, Brianna, and welcome.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this.
Me too. So tell us a little bit about your story as a woman entrepreneur, would you?
Oh, sure. It's a long and windy story, but I'll try and succinctly summarize it. Um, I've always been very business minded and very entrepreneurial driven. So I think I started my first business when I was like 6, and I was making little clay figures out of the mud in our backyard to give to neighborhood kids. And I graduated from that into official businesshood eventually. But yeah, I've always known that I have very fierce drive and I have a lot of very creative passions. And so I had a lot of trouble kind of fitting that into the corporate world or, like the standard options after graduation and stuff like that. So I started my business as it is now as a photography business. So this was right around the time when my first daughter was born. So in 2003 is when I really started to get serious about that. And by the time my second daughter was born in 2005, I was official and kind of out there and shingle and all. And so since then, my business has really evolved from doing just photography to begin with into doing graphic design and marketing, which is what I actually went to school for. And then the marketing stuff came into play, and I got really jazzed about doing branding work and stuff like that, and getting people kind of on track with that. And so that sort of started to take over a little bit. And then, long story short, ish, 2 years ago, I went through a healing crisis or a health crisis, and in the process of all of that, kind of reprioritized everything. And that's kind of taken me where I am now in my business, which is doing art and healing and workshops and a lot of faith-based stuff.
Tell me about your tell me about what happened to make you totally change kind of your you don't have to get into the details of your health crisis if
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to, but what was it that spurred the change? Kind of what did you decide?
That was a huge catalyst for me. I was going through some relationship issues at the time too, and had kind of kept ignoring some of the stuff that was happening in my life and some of the old wounds that kind of were just kind of kept getting buried. And so eventually I ended up going through this health crisis where I was in a ton of pain and nobody could figure out why. And so I went through scans and tests and blood work and exploratory surgery and bounced around between 17 different doctors, and nobody could tell me anything. And so in the process of all this, being in so much pain, there were a lot of days where I was pretty bedridden and I couldn't really function. And so I turned back to doing prayer journaling, and I went back to doing art, which is kind of like my hidden love. Up to that point, wasn't it hidden? Anyways, no, it's not. But so I kind of noticed that as I was working through stuff in my journal, and I would see that kind of appear on the canvas. And so all of this stuff that I was working out just kind of spilled over into the artwork itself. And so during that process, I recognized that so much deep healing was happening, and things that I thought I had healed in the past, like logically in my brain, I had healed them, quote unquote, but it had never really stuck and never really taken hold. And so to see this kind of play out on the canvas was a really powerful thing. And by the end, I was working on 2 really large canvases, and by the end of those 2, my pain was gone. So yeah, that was the moment when I realized this is a big deal. Like, people need to know how to do this, and it's so easy that I need to be able to share it with people.
So would you say that you healed intellectually but not really emotionally? Is that kind of what you meant by that
Yeah,
you thought you'd healed things, but it really wasn't?
yeah, exactly. It's one thing to like get it and to say, oh, that makes sense. I understand why that would make me do these things or have these patterns in my life. But to actually go in and heal on a spiritual or emotional level is something completely different.
And the irony is you have to feel it all to heal it.
Yeah.
And so when you the way that you used art, so my dad is an artist and I come from a long line of artists, and I've never talked about myself as an artist, although I loved art, but I don't I think one of the hardest parts about art is that it's so personal.
Yes.
And so how do you as an artist sell things or sell kind of your babies? Sometimes I think they can feel that way. Canvases or sculptures or whatever can feel that way. I think you're frozen.
Oh,
do you see yourself frozen?
No, it's still working for me. Is it frozen on your end?
A little bit. Now it's better.
Okay.
You're good. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about turning this into something that will make you money.
That was the hardest part, I think, is figuring out how to translate that, because as an artist, a lot of times we kind of buy into the whole starving artist thing, you know, and the idea that not everybody values art on the same level, and so how do you price it? And it's like a whole slew of, I mean, that's an entire conversation in and of itself. But for me, you know, I sort of just let my intuition guide me when it came to that sort of thing. And so the big project that kind of came out of all this is called 100 Painted Prayers. And it's, each one is a canvas. They're all different sizes and different themes and whatever. But from the very beginning when I'm painting them, they don't belong to me. And so I think that helps a little bit with that whole, like, not feeling like I'm selling off my children kind of feeling. That I recognize that the prayers are coming through me, but then they're meant to be kind of released into the wild at some point, in whatever, you know, fashion that takes. But yeah, I think that's still a little bit of a murky water for me. Is, you know, kind of just figuring out, you know, pricing and all the nitty gritty details of that. But for me, the biggest kind of business aspect of it is the workshops themselves, because I'm teaching other people how to do this process for themselves and how to use art to heal them, even if they don't think they're artists. And so for me, that's kind of where the translation comes in a little bit more strongly.
Tell me about what those workshops look like. Where do people have them? Who's buying them? Give us a little bit more information about those.
And they're crazy. And the best part about it is I have no idea what's going to happen at any of them. Like, they're all so different, because it's different people coming from different backgrounds and different walks of life. And, you know, most of the time they end up being a really cathartic, kind of like a group art therapy session. But we have them anywhere from, you know, I have studio space where we can have them, or people will host them in their own garage or basement or dining room or whatever, and we just throw up drop cloths and have at it. And it's always kind of an interesting experience, because it's not like a paint by numbers kind of a class where you come in and I teach you, this is what we're painting this tree today. It's like, we're going to paint your soul. Let's see what that looks like.
It's a little different than the ones that are like the wine and wine and paint, where they're like, here, you can draw. We'll draw it out for you.
Yeah.
This is totally different than that.
It is. Yeah. And with this, it's about the process and not the product. And so it doesn't really matter what it ends up looking like. Although you will see some pretty amazing things come out of it. But it's really about the process and allowing and being curious and kind of tapping into whatever kind of comes through intuitively for you with that.
Are people surprised by what they have happen and what they see and how they are actually artistic?
Yeah, it's kind of amazing, because 9 times out of 10, somebody will walk into my workshop and they'll be like, well, I can't draw a stick figure. And I'm like, well, good, because we're not drawing stick figures today, you know? And so they all kind of come in with this attitude, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm so out of my element. And I think that actually helps facilitate this process a little bit, because if somebody comes in and they're a seasoned artist and they have all of this technique behind them, I think that can kind of start to get in the way of allowing. You know, it's so easy to try and direct and try and, you know, force it into what you think it should look like if you know what you're doing.
Right. I can totally see that. And I think people who are, in my experience, I've coached and consulted with a lot of artists, because as you said, it's hard to know what to value.
Yes.
Your soul and your work that comes from so deep inside of you. So
yes.
it's really hard to know But I think one of the challenges is that, it feels sometimes like you're selling your soul when you're an artist, because you have to, this one piece sells every time you do something like it or close to it. So how do you kind of help people with, or how do you help yourself with kind of getting over that? You said like the stuff inside your workshop never feels like you, but is there a way that you kind of have tricked yourself or convinced yourself that it isn't you?
Yeah, I think the first thing that I ever had to learn in doing this, and this goes way back to like even my photography days,
Mm-hmm.
is that you're not going to resonate with everybody, and so you can't take it personally. If somebody walks up to one of my paintings now and they're like, "Oh, that is awful. Like that is hideous. It's so dark. It makes me feel blah." I recognize that it's not the art itself that's doing that. It's triggering something inside of them, or it's
super important.
yeah, absolutely. And so I've actually learned to use that to my advantage. And so like if I'm having a gallery showing or something like that, and somebody says a comment like that, like, "Oh, this one's really dark," and they kind of draw away from it, I actually engage them with that. And like, well, what is it about it that's feeling off for you? Or what is it that kind of makes you feel like that, And that it kicks off this whole conversation that then puts it back on them, and it kind of lets me off the hook, right? I mean, then it's not that I'm a crappy artist or that I'm like, that I don't know what I'm doing or that my stuff is so, whatever. But I think that in being able to do that and not take it personally, it really helps free me up to see how my art can impact people in all kinds of different ways, and not just like making them feel good or make them say, "Oh, that's so pretty," That's actually my least favorite comment about any of my paintings. If somebody says, "Oh, it's so pretty," I'm like, "No, do better." Like, well, what does it feel?
Well, because that's a surface, that's a surface kind of thought.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate what you said about if, it's a piece of yours triggering something in somebody, because that's really what marketing is.
Right.
Anything is triggering, getting into the feelings. And a lot of times we don't necessarily have words for our feelings. We just know that we feel something.
Yeah.
And that usually makes us very uncomfortable. And that's, I think, one of the best things about art is that, you can walk into a gallery or into a museum or into, an artist studio and feel something that you didn't feel 2 seconds before. And I love that you're really helping people understand how to kind of channel that in your workshops out of them in a healing way.
Right.
So I just think that's super powerful and really, really neat. So tell me about your, we kind of talked a little bit before, and you'd mentioned that you had a business that failed. Oh, yeah. Can you tell me about that?
Oh, yeah. I'm actually really good at failing. I think that's become one of my superpowers. I think my biggest kind of like most epic failure to date is that I probably 4 years ago or so, I had opened a space here downtown in my city, and it was this gorgeous space, and I had this vision for it where we were going to bring in all of these like spiritual healer creative types to kind of use this as like a hub. So it was going to become like the go-to place in my town for all of this really cool stuff to happen. There's going to be classes and workshops and all this great stuff, and I was really excited about it. And so I dove right in, because it's what I do, and renovated the space and got it all set up and started trying to gather the people, and I failed miserably. It didn't go anywhere. I had people that were kind of coming on board, but then they would flake out. They wouldn't pay me. They would, it just ended up being this huge cluster. And I was trying to like pull these pieces together. And in the meantime, my whole business kind of got set to the side. Like, I'll deal with this once this is in place. And so it really kind of just crashed and burned all the way around. I recognize now, obviously in hindsight, looking back, that I was trying to do it all myself. I was trying to be all the things and make it all happen and figure it all out on my own, instead of relying on other people's strengths or calling in other people to help support in different areas. And, in my personal life, I had zero support for this project, and so that didn't help, and so I think it just was a huge lesson for me on like, okay, so stick to what your strengths are and allow other people to help with the other stuff.
Yeah, we're not always very good at allowing the help part. That's
Right.
usually, I got it.
Yep.
Don't worry.
I
It'll be
can do
fine.
this.
I can do it all.
Yes.
Oh no. Well, I totally feel for you. I mean, I really the hard part about failure is that you don't know what you don't know until you fail. You
Right.
don't know that you need those things until after it's too late sometimes, and you've invested time and money and energy and the sacrifices and the consequences that come of that. Like you said, like your core business suffered because of that, and I really understand that, and know that it's easy to follow your dreams down a path that is you just didn't ever foresee. Would you ever do you regret that decision, or is that just part of your journey?
No, I don't. At the time, I did. At the time, I really did, because when that collapsed, everything else went with it. I mean, kind of all at the same time. It was right as I was turning 30, and I always joke around that my 20s hit the self-destruct button on the way out the door, because I lost everything. So like my relationship went out, which means I also lost my home and my vehicle. And
Yeah.
I had my business, like the space collapsed. My business license was revoked temporarily because of a sales tax snafu. And so like it just, at the time, I absolutely had regret about it. But of course now, even just seeing the opportunities it gave me to rebuild from there, and sort of, standing in the ashes of all of that rubble, and recognizing that now I have kind of this clean slate and I can create anything I want from this. So that was really empowering when I sort of shifted my perspective there and was able to take ownership of that a little bit more. And I I can't say that I regret any of it, because I love where I'm at now. I love it. It's great. And I wouldn't be here if I hadn't gone through that.
Oh, isn't that just the truth? And it's so when you're in it, it's so hard. And I'm sure that there are women that are going to watch this and we're going to feel like the barn is burning down around them and they'll never recover. And it's the biggest embarrassment. And, they should have known better. That's what I always do to myself is how could I not know better?
Right.
I'm a business coach and consultant. How did I find myself in this position? But but in little ways every day we fail and we succeed, and it's just kind of in those big moments where I think we learn who we really
Oh
are.
yeah.
And I would say without a doubt you are an entrepreneur if you're standing in the middle of the rubble and you say, now I have a clean slate.
Right.
Instead of like I'm gonna go hide under the covers and I'm never gonna do this again. I'm gonna go get a 9-to-5 job
Right.
with health insurance and gonna be good. So I think it's a blessing and a curse to be a true entrepreneur, but I think that's probably one of the ultimate tests is if you really are.
Yes.
So congratulations, and I'm sorry.
Thank you.
So tell me about how you were a wedding photographer, right? And now are you still doing that, or is that gone now and you're just doing the healing work full time?
No, it's really gone. And there, I can't say it's completely gone, because I think I'll always be a photographer somewhere in there. But I don't advertise or push for any of that anymore. Most of the time when somebody comes to me for that, I'll refer them to a friend of mine, and that works out pretty well. But I'll still do the occasional photo shoot and stuff like that for friends or people that I'm really excited about. But yeah, I think that I held on to that for way too long, and I kept trying to force it to work, and it was really hard for me to admit that maybe that wasn't kind of my end all be all purpose in life, because I thought for a long time that it had to be. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey to see how that evolves, but I definitely feel like I've found kind of at least the beginning of where my purpose is supposed to lead me now.
I think one of the hardest things is when we're really good at something and get a lot of accolades and people are referring you and people are loving your work and you say it does not light me up.
Yeah.
It's great that people love it, but it doesn't light me up. That's a hard kind of decision to make and to stare at your own reflection in the mirror and admit. So I I really value that you were able to do that.
Right.
I'm sure do people think you're crazy?
Yes.
Do people, okay, tell me more about that. Tell me what other people think.
Yes, people think I'm insane. And it's just so funny because every time, if I go for like a few months without seeing someone and I run into them in Target or whatever, like they always kind of just look at me like, so what are you doing now?
At least they still ask.
I know, yeah, they're still interested or intrigued or curious, I guess. So that's a win. But yeah, it's really hard for me because I'm so passionate about everything and I can do a lot of things really well. So like anything creative, I've had my hand in it, and it's hard because I kind of feel like because I'm so good at it, I have to do it. And so like you're saying, being able to let go of that and kind of move into where I know I'm supposed to be has been difficult. And every time I sort of transition a little bit, I cringe, like I put it out there and then I kind of cringe, like, okay, how's this going to be? How's this going to be?
Yeah.
And are they going to think I'm completely off the deep end, or am I just going to lose everybody because they can't keep up with me? So yeah, that's challenging.
So the only problem I have with Blab is that I can't do most things at one time. So if somebody comments over here, then I'm like, huh?
Wait.
Wait, hold on. Stop talking, you. I gotta talk. Yeah. So I actually don't do a lot over on the right hand side here because of that, because I want to talk to you. So if somebody, comes in and says something, it might be a minute before I see it. But anyway, so tell me about, I really liked your mantra, or the kind of your quote that you sent me, and it was always leave room for miracles.
Yeah.
And I love that. Yeah. So tell me more what that means to you.
That has definitely become my mantra over the past few years. Because for me, it talks to the idea that like we can't see all of the possibilities. You know what I mean? And no matter what it is you believe, if it's God or the universe or whatever higher power it is that you believe is kind of orchestrating things or has a hand in things, I think that there's so much that we can't predict or we can't foresee. And so when we try to say, okay, so here are the three possibilities and there's nothing outside of this, so this is what I'm planning for, and you sort of pigeonhole yourself into that, and then you kind of just it doesn't leave space for the miracles to happen. I find that time and time again, if I decide like this is what I want to do and that's all I'm going to focus on, this is all I can see, I miss all of these opportunities happening around me. I miss all of these connections that I could be making because I've got tunnel vision, right? And so I think for me, that idea of always leave room for miracles means you're just being aware, you're being open, you're saying like this is what I want, but I'm open to something better.
I don't know if you've heard of Danielle Laporte and her desire map.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When I did the desire map, one of my core desired feelings that I just kind of came up with this year, it's new because I've done this for a couple of years, but was magic. And I think that's my version of miracles, I guess. But I think that I was listening to Mike Dooley, who wrote all sorts of, the universe kinds of, I can't think of what it is now. Anyway, I probably have one. And he was talking about how when you chart a course and you say that you want to go to, so I'm in, Red Wing, Minnesota right now, and I want to go to Minneapolis. And I put it in my little GPS on my phone that I want to go to Minneapolis and an address in Minneapolis. And there's all these things that happen in Google Maps or in Apple, Maps that calculate all of these things that we can't see.
Right.
Because we're here right now, and it calculates as we go. And that's kind of how he explained the universe. Mm-hmm. And I just thought it was so cool how that was kind of the first time where it really hit me like, oh, there is kind of a plan. And I just have to decide that I want to go to Minneapolis, and then set the chart for that course. And then maybe I'll end up there. So
right, exactly.
And maybe not, maybe I end up in a better place. But I think that there was, or take a different route is really, I think what he was saying is we can't really determine our route, and know every single step right now for when I leave in 2 hours. And then, Waze or any of these other apps, they actually change course as you go to get you there the fastest.
Right.
And so I really, that was something that really inspired me the other day when I couldn't sleep and I was listening to Mike Dooley
Right.
about, charting miracles and making change and all that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah.
do you have any questions for me? We're about half an hour in, and I want to be very conscientious of your time. Do you have any questions for me, or would you like to add anything else?
Oh,
Turn the tables.
Right. Wait a minute now. So here's a question for you then. When you are doing these interviews and that sort of thing, like what is the one theme that you think sort of starts to reoccur throughout them? Like what's the thread that joins all of us?
Nobody does it right the first time.
Right.
And until we start talking about that and admitting it and not hiding the fact that we fail, and sometimes in a big way, sometimes in a small way, that it's hard to help each other. It's hard to be supportive of each other. And I think women have this really awful tendency to be competitive with one another.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to figure out a way through these kinds of interviews and through the UnleaSHEd confessions that we can talk about what goes well and what doesn't go well in an authentic and vulnerable way, but be safe and be in a safe environment that no one's going to say, well, of course that didn't work. What were you thinking? That just makes me, cringe to think of what people sometimes say, especially our family.
They're the worst.
Sometimes our families are the worst, sometimes because they don't know what we know. They only know us in a certain kind of role and in a certain way. And so I think it's so important to find that external support. And so whenever I've interviewed women or even any of my clients, the number one thing that usually happens during an interaction, especially my first interaction with a woman client, is she cries. And it's because for some reason, women, here's their life and here's their business. And this is what happens. It's not, I think a lot of men can, my husband has his own business and it's very parallel. It's not super enmeshed. He can see this as something that happened in business and something that happens in his life. But women, for some reason, we just mesh those two together. And so when we feel like we're failing in our business, it's really a failure of us personally and our own worth.
Yes.
So that's usually the overarching feeling, is that I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing the right things. I'm not enough. I'm not right. I'm a failure. So that's kind of the overarching theme, unfortunately. And my hope is that by doing videos like this and people hearing stories like yours that say, yeah, I had a clean slate. I started over and look at me now. I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
And I wouldn't be here if I hadn't gone through that. So, yeah. I mean, I just think that's so important. So thank you for being willing to share your story.
Oh, of course. Absolutely. Yeah. I know that I think stories are probably the most valuable thing that we have, especially as women. And the more we can share our stories and connect with others that way, I think that's what we're meant to be doing. Helping to pave the path for others to follow.
Absolutely. And I think and ironically, it's in the authenticity and the vulnerability that we actually create the relationships in which we can sell our goods and services.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the irony. It's not looking like I'm perfect, have perfect hair, have perfect, right now online on Facebook, the number of six-figure this and stilettos that, and, glitter and that stuff just, it works for a little while, but unfortunately, it doesn't always last.
Right.
So I think that the more we can be authentic and vulnerable with one another, the more likely we are to create the relationships that actually lead us to our clients and our customers.
Exactly.
So, do you want to give a little shout out about your website and where people can find out more about you?
Yeah, absolutely. I am on, my website is creativestaticstudios.com. and I am on virtually every social media outlet there is under Creative Static. So, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, you name it.
Awesome. I just typed it in there. Did I get it spelled right?
Nope, it's here, I'll type it. Creative Static Studios.
Oh, Studios,
yeah,
sorry.
Nope, that's okay.
There you go.
Yeah, so yeah, that's where you can find all my stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it. And I think I can't wait to watch your progress and to see where the healing workshops take you. And I think I can see a book, I can see YouTube's, I can see tons of opportunity with this idea, because I think it just hits a nerve for so many people.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff stewing behind the scenes, so we'll see.
Good. I like it. Of course there is.
Always.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Megan.
And have a great rest of your day. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.